Hi, Mavis. Hi, Bob. I'm very glad.
Hello, Angel.
I'm very glad to be here with you in this interview, no? Because I would like to share the ACL model to the Latin America community, Peruvian community of psychologists.
Happy to be here with you.
Mm.
Yes.
So maybe my first question is, why did you choose to study psychology, and how was your career path after graduating as psychologist?
Can I take an hour to answer this question?
Yeah. No, it's like
You have 1 minute.
So I have an unusual path to get to psychology and studying psychology, and that is I graduated in engineering. I went into a business setting in which I was running a small company, mainly selling electrical supplies and kind of engineering related things and so forth. And and one of the things that I needed is I was trying to hire people to work in this company. This is going to take too long, I think, right? Are you
Can we
worried?
shorten it? Yeah, I'd like the questions.
and so um, and so I didn't know how to select people who would be in this company, who would work with me. And so I ran into a system which was actually constructed by a psychologist somewhere, in which he had like 6 little tests that you give people, and you give them these tests, and then you score them, and then it comes up with an answer. The answers were qualified, overqualified, underqualified, or unqualified. And I thought, here I'm trained in engineering, and I thought, oh, this is wonderful. We can take humans, give them some tests, decide whether they're qualified or unqualified. That sounds just great. And so, uh, so I said, okay, that sounds great. And then I was talking to some colleagues about it, and they said, well, have you heard of the MMPI? That's actually a good thing to give people a test. I said, no, I haven't heard of the MMPI, but why not just order some MMPIs and we'll just give them to people? So I looked up on the web how to get an MMPI, and they said, well, are you a psychologist? I said, no, I'm an engineer. They said, well, you can't order MMPIs if you're not a psychologist. You have to be a psychologist. I said, well, how do I do that? They said, well, this is to give you an idea. And so I'm very unfamiliar with psychology in the beginning. They said, well, you've got to take courses, you've got to go to graduate school, blah, 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 blah. So that actually is what started me on the career. I said, well, I want to order an MMPI. Now, in this day and age, of course, I don't use MMPIs, but back then I thought, well, this is the key. So, Mavis, am I getting too far afield here?
You do need to shorten the answer.
All right. You have to remember, Renzo, this is what Mavis is worried about with me. And so, so I actually went and I decided, it took me a while, decided in order to order MMPIs, I have to go to graduate school in psychology. So that's actually the beginning of my career. And that's what started it. And of course, the end result is I do not use MMPIs now, of course, and I'm completely different. But that really is the change to my career. And so there's more to the questions. What was the career path after graduating?
Let me answer my part of it. It's a lot simpler. I don't think that my path reflects that of most people. I'm curious about your path, but I know we're here to talk about us. But I knew very early on that this was my calling. I knew it in middle school. And so I just pursued. I remember taking psychology classes as a high school student at our local college, and then just getting very focused on getting a bachelor's degree in psychology, which I did at UCLA in Los Angeles, and then I applied to graduate school. So it's been a very straight, short path for me because I just knew this was my passion.
So I just want to say, I knew I had to get into graduate school in order that I can eventually order MMPIs. And so I'm willing to undertake this course, 5 years of study to do this. And so that's what I did. And the reason they took me in graduate school is because at that time, they wanted people with engineering background. Because especially with the neuropsychological stuff that's going on, they needed somebody who was very well schooled and that kind of thing. So that's the route that I took. And I actually got into graduate school. They were happy to take an engineer who knew nothing about psychology into graduate school.
And the second part of the question is our career path after becoming a psychologist. So in graduate school, when you're in a doctoral program in the US, they really focus on training us to become researchers and academicians. And that's what I was trained to do in graduate school. So I went to graduate school here at the University of Washington. And it was actually very difficult for me to make the decision not to go into academia because I was so well trained to do it, but I didn't want to sell my soul to publish or perish because that was what most academicians faced. And so I started in private practice, and I also taught graduate students at the UW, and I've managed to create this career where I get to do all the things that I love, which is clinical work, research, teaching, but not be dominated by the policies of the university.
So,
and
yeah,
you went the traditional route, but you didn't care for the longest time about promotion. You just kind of did what you wanted. And it wasn't until last 10 years of your career that you decided, oh, maybe I should get promoted to full professor. Like you got your tenure, and then you just did the research that you wanted to do. And
right.
Yeah.
And a very important part of my career in terms of development of that is that during my graduate school years, I saw Mavis actually do amazing things with clients. And so I didn't quite understand how is this possible? How was she able to do such remarkable things and get changes in clients? And so that became an interest of mine to understand how Mavis had such incredible impact on clients. That's a shortened story. Does that make sense?
That's how FAP was created.
And that's how FAP was created. And
so your next question, you wanted to know
Yeah, the next.
what FAP means in our life today, and how did our clinical practice change by implementing FAP?
Yeah.
So I think it went both ways. It's like you were describing what I was doing, and we created FAP that way. You came up with the rules by watching what I was doing, but because we both followed the rules, it really increased the impact and the power of our therapy. And so it was this creating it, but then it enriched what we did so much. And it's this feedback loop where our clients just gave us more feedback about, wow, this is really powerful, what you're doing.
that's a very important part of the whole process, and that is I went from very traditional behavior therapy type procedures and then saw remarkable changes that Mavis produced in clients, remarkable changes. And I thought, well, how is she doing that? How does that come from? And actually trying to solve that mystery of how it is that Mavis was able to get incredible clinical improvements in clients. What was involved with that? I mean, I would call that a very important element in the development of FAP and how we got to where we are. So now, how did you do? Why were you so good with the clients? Never mind. So, but I think, we tried to capture what it was that you did. But the reality is you had a lifetime of training growing up. And
Well, remember I was a graduate student when you were doing this.
yes,
Yeah, when I was near the end of my graduate career and then the beginning of my postdoctoral career when we were really trying to outline how can we teach this to other people.
Right.
So what are you thinking as you're listening to us?
Is this confusing to you, or?
No, I was, well, there was things that I didn't read on the books. So parts from the book and parts from I didn't know. So I'm impressed to know this new information. So it's very good.
So, and then the question is, how did Mavis become such an incredibly good clinician without the formal training? Because she was just that way naturally. And that's actually trying to capture what it is that made her so powerful. Again, that's kind of the origins of FAP. Do you agree? That's what it was about. And it was, right, it was throwing out the usual ways to develop treatments and do treatment and so forth.
Yeah, it's important to me and sharing the beginning of FAB to the people starting to know how FAB was created. No? So,
right. So in a nutshell, one of the things that I picked up is that when Mavis was interacting with clients clinically, incredible things would happen, remarkable things in terms of client change, insights, and so forth. And that was very powerful for me. And I wanted to systematize this so others like me could do this with clients when they see that. And that again, that is kind of the essence of FAP. What do you think, Mavis? Am I praising you too much about you?
We can move on, thank you.
All right.
yeah, it's very good to know the beginning, no? So
Yeah, but so in layman's terms, so the rules, you know the rules, like rule 1 being aware of clinically relevant behaviors, rule 2 evoking clinically relevant behaviors, rule 3 reinforcing them, rule 4 being aware of our impact, and rule 5 generalizing. And I think I naturally just knew that I wanted to be as authentic as I could with the person in front of me and to see the best of who they are. And that got translated into this work.
Right.
yeah. So the experience to first the experience, next the rules. Yeah. Maybe we can go to the next question. It's about the research. Can you tell us how the Center of Social Connection at the University of Washington was created?
So a lot, there's all of this pre-stuff that occurred that allowed this to happen. In the process of me trying to systematize what it is that Mavis does that's so powerful, Mavis and I developed a theory and ways to kind of capture this. Very different, by the way, there's fundamental things that are very different, as you know, about FAP from every other type of therapy. And so, so in the process of doing that, that's the development of the therapy, and I'm just repeating myself. So,
Okay,
right?
and then how did you get funding for the Center for Science of Social Connection?
Well, I was fortunate enough to have a person who was very taken with this therapy. So this is the most remarkable thing they ever heard of in terms of how the therapy worked. Because with FAP, you actually throw out almost a lot of the usual rules at the time that people were following when they do therapy. And the person said, I want to provide funds for you because this is an incredible treatment. I'd like to provide funds for you so that you can do the research, the outcome research, and help promote it and pass this on to the world. And in that process, we hired Jonathan Cantor, and he actually came up with the idea for the Center for Science, the Social Connection, and that's how it happened. So this is all. I'm being very brief about this. It sounds like it was a smooth process. There's all little steps along the way. There's resistance at the time because FAP is not a typical therapy. And so there was always resistance to these ideas. And a typical comment made by my colleagues when we present FAP is to say, oh, you're doing psychoanalysis. So I thought, what? No, this is a different kind of thing. But in many ways has a lot in common with what psychoanalysts do. We're very sympathetic, I am personally, to what Freud did, how he came up with psychodynamic principles, and so forth, which actually map on well. They're consistent with FAP. This may be surprising to people, but they're consistent even though the theory is not psychodynamic, not psychoanalytic. Is that too brief? I'm just wondering if this makes any sense.
No, it's not too brief. So
Okay.
Did we answer your question about the Center for Science of Social Connection?
Yeah, it's very clear and important because I know also a question we get the answer. No? So about that, other kind of question about the therapist, I like to ask you about what does FAP require to be considered an evidence-based therapy?
So when the Center for Science of Social Connection was first created, this was back in 2013, and Jonathan, I just see Jonathan Cantor as this amazing researcher and scientist. And we were really focused at that time on how do we make FAP an evidence-based treatment, because that was the zeitgeist in the field, that everybody was paying attention to evidence-based therapies, and there were certain criteria. Do you remember what the criteria were at that time? Like a certain number of RCTs, randomized controlled trials, and the developer of the research of the therapy couldn't be involved in it. And at that time, I don't think we had very many RCTs, maybe one.
Mm.
And I don't know where the field is in terms of the criteria for evidence-based trials for a therapy to be called evidence-based. FAP doesn't meet those formal criteria. And it's been hard to do these RCTs because FAP is so individualized. It's hard to say, this is exactly what you do. This is the manual, and this is how you create the research so that everybody's following the manualized guidelines for doing FAP. Because each person comes in and they have their individualized clinically relevant behaviors. It's very hard for us to research in the proper ways that RCTs are being done in the field. Why else would you say we had
trouble? Well, I mean, the difficulty in general is that people have a misunderstanding about FAP in the sense that it works, it's based on principles which can vary from client to client and situation to situation. And the principles are very solid. They're based on behavioral, well-researched principles and so forth. But because they don't lend themselves to a 1, 2, or 3-step procedure, it requires a much broader view as to what's going on. And this is probably getting vague again. So I would say, the thing is we've collected, we've written several books, we've published many articles, we have a relatively large following, people that practice FAP. So people understand it. Once you try it, people can actually get into trying it. people get sold that this is a good way to proceed. And we're always looking, though, for more evidence-based, traditional, typical evidence-based studies to be done. So we've published a lot. How many books have we done?
5, and there are lots of little research studies. We need more
Right.
RCTs. So I think our field has moved away from the importance of what qualifies as an evidence-based treatment. I think it's a broader definition now. Would you say, Renzo, that we want to, if someone comes in with a particular disorder, we want to use what is the most evidence-based treatment? So if somebody has borderline personality disorder, the most research treatment obviously is DBT. And there are lots of clients who come in with less clear disorders. They're unhappy, they have relationship issues, they have fear of intimacy. And I think, as Bob was saying, that we have a large evidence base for our work in terms of the principles of behaviorism, and there have been lots of single subject design studies and small studies done on FAP. But what is really important is the needs and preferences of each individual client and navigating the relationship with that client, what it is that they want from therapy. So I think that what impacted us most in terms of our development of FAP is the feedback that we got from our clients and from our students. So this is what's working, this is what isn't working, and that's what shaped us, and that's what we hope to shape everyone else out there who's using FAP principles. Is it working?
Yeah.
Your clients.
I know because I made FAP, so I know the results.
And I think one of the most important tenets of evidence-based treatment is just this commitment to an ongoing focus on collecting evidence and expanding our knowledge and collecting data in whatever ways we do it. That we're not like narrowly focused on, this is the best way, but just to be very open-minded about what we're doing and continually collecting data however we collect data. It could be these large studies, or it could just be one-on-one, like collecting our weekly session bridging questions and getting feedback from our clients to, is this working?
Yeah. I think we have, 5 minutes, but maybe we can, I think this is an important question. Maybe. What can FAP provide to therapists who works with non-behavioral therapies, such as psychodynamic, humanistic, existential therapies, or another ones?
I mean, one response I have to that question is that I'm very friendly. Mavis and I are very friendly to many different types of therapy and interventions. So, for example, I'm many types, and I'm very much taken with psychodynamic and Freud's work and so forth. Although I don't, of course, adhere to the theory, but I think there are important discoveries in that. So, I would say that we can, with our approach, we can actually talk to just about anybody with any theoretical orientation and talk about some principles that they can use to promote what's important in terms of getting clinical improvement. So I could go into that quite a bit, but I think that's one of the powers of FAP, is that even though the theory, which is contextual behaviorism according to Skinner, is seen by most people as narrow, improperly, it actually is extremely broad in its acceptance of techniques and methods that could work. And the idea of a formula, some simple little thing that you can do that always is going to work, which is characteristic of many therapies today, we actually don't adhere to that. We think what's important, there's certain principles that are important, but what's important is much more about the process that you go through when you do therapy. So I guess I could just mention one word about that. One of the principles, which is developed on our theory and based on FAP, is that what happens between the therapist and the client, that interaction, is precious and actually offers opportunities for producing remarkable change, the actual interactions that occur. And so our whole theory, FAP theory, is based on capturing something about that interaction. And I'll say it in a word which is probably confusing, and that is how the client's daily life problems actually occur in the therapy session with the therapist. Now, is that 100% correct? It's not 100%, but it's very, very correct. And that's why I'm friendly to psychoanalysis, because they came up with this idea of transference, which they saw as kind of a pathological process. We see this as normal, and that is the client and the therapist interacting with each other will replay the problems that the client is having in everyday life. And this provides an amazing therapeutic opportunity.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter what kind of theoretical framework you operate from, what type of therapy that you do. If you learn FAP principles, you really believe it's going to add intensity to your work and just add impact to your treatment, because we focus on what's happening in this moment. And there's nothing more powerful than what's happening in this moment between you and your client, or between you and someone else. So, like in this moment, I'm not aware of anything else but you. You are in Lima, Peru, and here we are in Seattle, USA, and we're having this just really powerful connection with each other. And I'm feeling your presence and your curiosity. Just so appreciative that you want to bring FAP to a larger audience. And so Renzo, why is that? Why did you want to talk to us? Why do you want to bring FAP to more people?
Well, for me, because for me the social connection is really important. It's really important. It's something about my life, no? Maybe about my history, no? But the moments that I connect with people with ACL model of FAP in therapy was really good for me, no? And I would like to those moments and to bring those moments for more people. Maybe sharing this to other therapists, they can improve the therapy. So, you know, makes that moment, those moments, too more moments to connect with people. You know, well, in Peru, in Latin America.
Right. You've mentioned ACL, and so that's the awareness, courage, and love model, which it's my way of bringing FAP to the general public. So those are the middle level terms that we assign to FAP. It's based on the rules, and it's suggesting that therapists act with awareness, courage, and love in terms of how we work with clients, but it's also promoting those behaviors, those very same behaviors in our clients. And one of your earlier questions was, you know, how has our career path been since we became psychologists? And I've switched more and more to focusing on bringing FAP to the general public through the ACL Global project, because these principles, these ACL principles, are so powerful, Renzo. And you're a chapter leader in this project, and so you know that it can impact the general public without them having to be in therapy. And it just brings out the wisdom of the individual and the power of community in ways that we can't do in individual therapy, but it's based on these principles that originated in FAP. And so to anybody who's watching this interview, I would love for them to go to the website, livewithacl.org, to find out more about the project of bringing FAP to the general public.
Yeah, I will share the link to. Well, I think it's time.
It was really a pleasure to talk to you.
Yes.
Yeah, for me too. It was very important for me this interview.
I'm very glad you invited us. So I take it as a personal.
Thank you.
Yeah, so for those of you watching this, Renzo sent us questions ahead of time, and one of the questions was, what are your recommendations to continue promoting FAP in Peru and Latin America? And I said to Bob, oh, we need more people like Renzo.
Right. I love that answer.
Yeah, we just need more people like you who are interested and who want to talk to other people about it.
Yeah, I continue doing this.
Thank you so much, Renzo.
Very thank you, both of you,
Thank you.
giving this time.